Good afternoon, everyone present here today. In the words of Albert Camus, he states, "A man without ethics is a wild beast loosed upon the world." The reason why we meeting here today for Whistleblowers for Change is about ethics. I would like to welcome each of you here present today. Member of Parliament, the Honourable Bantu Halumisa, welcome, who was the whistleblower of PIC. I welcome all the media who took time today to be able to present the information and our campaign today. And I'd like to welcome each of the whistleblowers whose names I will read out now. Thandeka Kubela Mbeki from SABC, Cynthia Stimple, SAA, Bianca Goodson, Trillion Financial Capital, Suzanne Daniels, Eskom, Musilo Motepo, Trillion, Aris Danikas, SAPS, Lindo Chibani, Estate Agency Affairs Board, Martha Ngoya from PRASA, Tiro Holele, PRASA, Rosemary Hunter, Pension Funds Financial Services Board, Denise Bjorkman, Bosasa, Angela Grizzi, Bosasa, Ethel Williams, Bain and Company, Martina de la Tongna, Parliament, Zelda Holtzman, Parliament, Motlantse Mokhatle, Parliament, Msikisi Makatse, National Lotteries Commission, Selo Kwina, National Lotteries Commission, Tabiso Zulu, Local Government, Karuni Naidu, SA Council for the Architectural Profession, Shamila Williams, Independent Police Investigating Directorate, Patricia Mashale, SAPS Firearms Registry, and many others who we know are whistleblowers and whose names we do not have on our list. I welcome everyone here today, and we have before you our mandate and campaign, which we are going to present at this stage. Thank you. I would like to call upon the first part of our agenda on Ms. Thandeka Kubela Mbeki.
We are a group of whistleblowers, each of whom has suffered considerable prejudice as a result of actions embarked upon by those involved in wrongdoing. We blew the whistle in the public interest, but this is by no means only about the state and its enterprises. Some of us have worked in large corporate businesses and other institutions that have also failed to live up to their espoused values and commitments. Our experience has demonstrated that corruption in our country is as much a private sector phenomenon as it is a public sector scourge. Several of us testified at the Zondo Commission and provided details of state capture, exposing and implicating the architects and perpetrators of state capture. We believe that the public, civil society, and the state must work together to bring prosecutions and meaningful accountability for the myriad of crimes committed. Martha, please come forward.
We note that the Zondo Commission found significant failures by internal and external auditors, company compliance officers, legal firms advising companies, service providers subject to FICA obligations to ensure accountability, risk management, and transparency, leaving it up to us to make disclosures of wrongdoing that such professionals ought to have revealed. the retaliatory action taken against us has taken many forms, from the weaponization of disciplinary procedures to legal suits aimed at harassing, impoverishing, and damaging the reputations of honest employees who blew the whistle on malfeasance in the public interest. It is thus important for us to emphasize the need not only for professional bodies to hold their members accountable to their professional codes of practice and fiduciary duties, but also to criminalize retaliatory action taken against whistleblowers. Tiroholele?
We, at this time, remember Babita Deokaran, who died at the hands of the worst kind of retaliators, assassins. We salute her contribution towards the fight against corruption in our country. In our quest for legislative reform, we honor her. Our struggles are in homage to her and other people who have been killed to silence them. We welcome Justice Zondo's recommendations aimed at strengthening the legal protection and institutional framework for whistleblowers and the fight against corruption in our country. We assert that our law should go further and criminalize the retaliatory actions described in the Protected Disclosures Act.
We believe that if the recommendations on whistleblowing contained in the Zondo report are acted on, we would stem the tide of the delegitimization of the state, the erosion of the rule of law, and the decimation of the capacity and capability of the state to deliver basic services, particularly to the poor and vulnerable. In the wake of our disclosures of wrongdoing on the part of public officials, corrupted police officers, and private sector role players, retaliatory actions have wrecked the lives of whistleblowers. In some cases, these wrongdoings have resulted in financial loss and mandate drift in the state-owned entities and public institutions such as SAA, ACTA, SABC, Transnet, Eskom, the National Lotteries Commission, PRASA, the Estate Agents Affairs Board, the SAA Council for the Architectural Profession, and others. More seriously, core state institutions, including law enforcement agencies, the South African Police Services, the Hawks, and the Independent Policing Investigating Directorate, Parliament, the government departments, especially those responsible for health and higher education, the South African Revenue Services, SARS, and the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, have been weakened and eviscerated. Most alarming has been the violation of constitutional rights of citizens by law enforcement officers in ways reminiscent of the dark days of apartheid. They have violated the constitutional rights of citizens that they should be protecting. At local government level, whistleblowers have faced arrest on trumped-up charges and attempted assassinations. Others have had to flee the country or move around in secret to safe houses in fear of their lives. In other cases, they have resulted in financial loss to private sector entities, such as retirement funds, and or to individuals, including employees of public and or private sector bodies, members and beneficiaries of retirement funds, and others.
Thus, we concur with Justice Zondo's assertion that whistleblowing is one of the most effective weapons against corruption. We agree that in most cases, the whistleblower has information that provides a detailed insight into hitherto unsuspected criminality, which is not readily ascertainable from routine inspection. We deplore the fact that the present system offers no inducement to the whistleblower to break cover. We agree that the bona fide whistleblower is actuated by a sense of duty of the highest order, as Justice Zondo explains in part 1 of the Zondo report. We agree with the recommendations for the establishment of an anti-corruption agency as proposed in part 1 of the Zondo report. We further believe that such an agency should be independent and impartial and subject only to its mandate, the law of this land, and the Constitution. Thus, we concur with Acting Chief Justice Zondo. We believe that this agency should have a division called the Office of the Whistleblower. This office must be adequately resourced with the necessary skill to ensure legal protection and social, psychological, and even health resources for whistleblowers.
The Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We believe that the JSE is an important institution in our economy. We believe that it can set the tone and culture of South African business, especially with regards to corrupt practices in the private sector. What the JSE does would be instructive beyond the listed sector. We believe an office of the whistleblower, JSE, should be established and popularized to help channel information to and from whistleblowers who know of possible securities law violation. This can be among a powerful weapon in the law enforcement arsenal against white-collar crime. Through their knowledge of the circumstances and individuals involved, whistleblowers can help the anti-corruption agency identify possible fraud and other violations much earlier than might otherwise have been possible. This would also minimize the harm to investors, better preserve the integrity of South African capital markets, and more swiftly hold accountable those responsible for unlawful conduct.
We hereby call for fundamental reforms to the Protected Disclosures Act, to introduce the need to compensate whistleblowers for the harm done to them, such as loss of livelihoods, income, life savings and pensions, reputations, etc. To introduce an expanded list of persons to whom a whistleblower contemplating making protected disclosures may go. Persons to whom such disclosures are made must be given the legal obligation to ensure confidentiality and adequate protection against harm for the whistleblower. To bring South African legislation in line with Article 32(2) of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which suggests that all signatory states, such as South Africa, provide for establishing procedures for the physical protection of such persons, such as, to the extent necessary and feasible, relocating them and protecting them, where appropriate, non-disclosure of limitations on the disclosure of information concerning the identity or whereabouts of such persons. We agree that such an authority or agency can determine a format and procedures for disclosure to the authority. Such procedures should be widely published so that the mechanism for making disclosure is simplified for prospective informants and is readily ascertainable by them.
Incentivized disclosures. The Zondo Commission favors whistleblower monetary awards, which effectively assist those who make protected disclosures to recoup financial losses suffered as a result of their principled stand. We are loath to support a system that encourages bounty hunting, such as the American system of incentivized disclosures based on a percentage of recouped funds after successful prosecutions. We support a system, however, of award based on the qualification of damages and losses suffered and or incurred as such, that we are more inclined towards the European whistleblower provisions that lean in this direction. However, we do recognize that financial crimes are, by their nature, more difficult to prosecute and take a very long time to build a case and counter legal defense strategies of the accused. The best evidence to do so would come from people who are direct witnesses and have hard evidence of fraud. Monetary reward for disclosing financial crimes involved in will both hasten convictions and also serve as a significant deterrent to potential fraudsters.
We understand this to be the rationale for the Zondo Commission's recommendations that a fixed percentage of monies recovered should be awarded to the whistleblower, provided that the information disclosed by the whistleblower has been material in obtaining the award. However, we are concerned that the act of whistleblowing never becomes a business enterprise or a lucrative revenue stream for some to enrich individuals who are motivated purely by making money, and law firms that do not really have the public interest at heart. We are concerned that some law firms and some advocates have been complicit in state capture by knowingly engaging in litigation that has little, if any, inherent merit, but is conducted for the principal purpose of distracting, harassing, and impoverishing whistleblowers and dissuading other people from blowing the whistle and exposing wrongdoing of clients represented by such law firms. We believe this is an abuse of the legal process and undermines the rule of law and violates the rights of everyone to equality before the law, irrespective of their financial means. Thus, we agree with the Commission, where it recommends that the mandate and the responsibility to litigate on behalf of the state is to be borne entirely by the state, and the responsibility to recover any damages or the disgorgement of monies related to corruption in public procurement not be privatized. We invite other whistleblowers to endorse the statement, subject to any, they can tell us what they think about it, and if they have any improvements to make on the statement that the signatories have made, they are welcome to let us know. We thank all the people and organizations who have come out in support of amending the protected disclosures and supporting whistleblowers thus far. We encourage South Africans to espouse the values of ethical citizenship and active citizenship in the public interest, and ask that you support our quest for a total reform of the Protected Disclosures Act, to create an enabling environment for active citizens to disclose corruption, abuse of power, maladministration in both the public sectors and the private sectors. We especially value the role of the media and the role that the media has played to ensure that our voices have been heard. After the public release of the second and third parts of the Zondo Commission report, we will hold further conferences to offer our perspectives. We do, however, want to see action rather than abstract discourse. Our lives and our livelihoods and our country are at stake. We call on the President to act expeditiously on the Zondo recommendations.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to our media statement. To set the framework for our discussion today, we'd like to invite two whistleblowers from Parliament to speak on what happened recently with the Parliament fire and what happened at their time during their work at Parliament and their reasons for whistleblowing.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's attending this important briefing from the perspective of whistleblowers. My fellow whistleblowers have been fascinated about our stories, our experiences as former managers within the Parliament administration. And so we've been linking the dots between what our experiences were during the Fifth Parliament and the continued management dysfunctions that have led to our People's Parliament burning down. This is how the year started. Ironically, just before Deputy Chief Justice Zondo released the first part of the report. Now, we're quite aware that the Commission has been looking at the role of Parliament in state capture. And we firmly believe that some of the issues we dealt with and we faced during the Fifth Parliament, particularly in the years where we saw things like signal jammers, high officials being suspended, myself included, for blowing the whistle internally on what we viewed and we experienced as a toxic management style. Later on, our former colleague committing a protest suicide in Parliament, Mr. Lennox Kagane, who left behind a note to the nation saying there is something deeply dysfunctional about our Parliament. And why is it that there have been no consequence management for those senior managers and even for looking at the role of the executive authority in the management of Parliament? Parliament at the moment is pointing the finger at a homeless person. They are looking at the role of the Department of Public Works, but ultimately Parliament is the oversight body of the country. It's the arm of state that is meant to oversee the Department of Public Works and its own administration. And I think there's a lot of questions that are starting to be asked in the Joint Standing Committee on the Financial Management of Parliament, and the country can only benefit from a total review of how this institution works. Many of my former colleagues have left under duress. The annual reports speak for themselves in terms of the turnover numbers for managers and specialists who have left the institution, not out of free will, not necessarily because they were done with the institution, but because the environment was so toxic. Why is this important to understand? Because as whistleblowers, our call here is for a revision of the Protected Disclosures Act. And ultimately, it is Parliament that's going to have to take this legislation and this challenge on and create an enabling environment for this country to reimagine its institutions, to create efficient administrations in all the arms of state in order to deliver services and enable a good life for all of South Africa's citizens. And our hope is that as the Commission releases the second report and the third part of the report, they will also touch on the role of Parliament. And it's for all of us as whistleblowers to be ready to engage and make our experiences known to the relevant portfolio committees and to Parliament as an institution, so that we can assist in rebuilding a new Parliament, a new state, and a more efficient form of governance that's ethical and that serves the interests of the citizens of this country. Thank you.
We'd like to now open for question and answer sessions.
My name is Griselda Lewis from SABC Television News. Any of the delegates could answer this one. I recall at the ceremonial handover of this Part 1 document to the President, not for the first time, commending whistleblowers and what they've done. What would you say, or how do you feel about the pace at which the South African government goes after those implicated in reports such as this. You've had Babita Deokaran, who's been killed. You've had another South African leave his country of birth. Many of the others remain here suffering. You've outlined that quite well. What would you say about the pace of how law enforcement agencies do their job in the work that you have done basically on their behalf? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'd like Martha, thank you.
Thanks for the question, and I think we know the answer. The pace is very slow. During his evidence at the State Capture Commission, the state president did allude to the protection of whistleblowers. Since then, what has been done to protect the whistleblowers? Babita Deokaran had to lose her life. There are a lot more other whistleblowers who are still outside. We know of witnesses who could not even be named. Take the Transnet witness, who was one of the bodyguards, whose life was almost taken away, who is still out in hiding. You know, how long ago did Transnet, at that particular whistleblower, give that evidence? It's a while ago. We have pledged, we have requested that it not just be a talk shop, that something be done. It is not within our hands. We are the people that have had to suffer the consequences of having had to come out to the state capture, and obviously is subject to subpoenas. You know, it was not, in some instances, yes, it was voluntary. In some instances, we were subpoenaed to come forward. And had it not been for the state capture, would our lives be what they are today? You know, I mean, in terms of where the state is and what is being done as far as, you know, making sure that the whistleblowers are protected, how often have we spoken about this? What is being done to date? I mean, I think as whistleblowers, we're very tired of actually having to come out and say, protect the whistleblowers and make it meaningful. Thus far, in our opinions, the process is taking far too long. And that is why we are appealing that this not just be a lip service issue. Something has got to be done. We speak to our livelihoods. We speak to financial losses. We speak to litigation costs. We speak to psychological impact that we have suffered. Who cares? And this is where we are, and this is where we find ourselves. It's taken too long. We don't need the State Capture Commission and the Zondo reports to await for the government to do something about the whistleblowers. They know what the plight of whistleblowers are.
May I respond to Griselda? Griselda, we will not wait in vain and we will not wait endlessly. We will approach the courts of this land to amend the Protected Disclosures Act if our discussions with the Department of Justice do not bear fruit.
My name is Andy DeBellis. I'm calling from Athens, Greece. I'm with Blueprint Greece here, based in Melbourne, which specializes in coverage of journalism protection and whistleblowers. And I want to make a loop here and ask a question of Ari Denikas, who is here in Athens, but was in South Africa and had to flee as a whistleblower in fear for his life, and to ask him how he thinks South Africa can perhaps use an EU model for whistleblower protection to provide compensation for people who suffer losses if it's not a financial crime that they have reported. And Ari knows more about South Africa than I do, obviously. So I wanted to see if he can kind of complete that loop between Europe and South Africa. And one final thing is that we know the dangers there. The whistleblowers retaliated against and killed. But in the last few years in the EU, journalists have been killed in Slovakia, Malta, the Netherlands, and in Greece. So I wonder if there's really any way to protect whistleblowers, and if the intent of authoritarian governments is to sever the link between journalists and their sources, who are whistleblowers. Ari, please.
Hello all. Hello South Africa. My name is Ari Denikas, and I was forced to exile from my beloved South Africa years ago. I Andy, let me first address your last question regarding journalists. I had recently worked on the European directive by assisting major international NGOs, including Transparency International Greece and Blueprint, into the development of certain mechanisms to support anonymous reporting tippings and help whistleblowers policies. We adopted the European model, and the European model in Greece helps, first of all, journalists. It recognizes the work journalists do to promote, to amplify the voice of whistleblowers. Consider journalists as a boombox, an amplifier that amplifies the voice of the whistleblowers. That's how I want to see journalists. And having said that, obviously because of the work they're doing, journalists have sources, whistleblowers are their sources. By collaborating together and amplify the voice of whistleblowers are in direct risk. What the directive did is it implemented a legislation that includes a journalist in the retaliation form, where if a journalist or NGO for that matter that supports whistleblowers gets retaliated because they are doing the job, they are protected under the Whistleblower Disclosure Act. So I believe that in South Africa, we need to adopt the same mechanism. So we need to recognize the value of journalists and NGOs that work together to amplify the suppressed voice of journalists. So in case of any risk while they're doing their jobs, I'm referring to journalists, or the intimidation, the slap suits, they are protected and also compensated once they lose their jobs. I am, and I speak of my group in South Africa, we are against bounty hunting. We don't want to make this as an enterprise, as a business. And I tried in Greece, and Dr. Damascu, who is actually here with us today and worked with me on that, we had countless debates about what is a whistleblower, what defines a whistleblower. And I tried to emphasize that we need to separate whistleblowers from paid informers. And that's a very crucial point, because we had passed outdated legislations in Europe, and particularly in Greece, which covered only registered and paid informers, but not whistleblowers. I like to see a whistleblower as a volunteer, a person that comes out and volunteers information about corruption and wants to contribute towards the well-being of his community. We don't want to get paid for it. We do want, however, to compensate for any loss of income, any retaliation. We need to have an organization that will support us psychologically, it will support our family, and also will help us when it comes to various retaliations. I mean, we've all been through them, we know what they're all about. The American system, it works, but it works on major financial corporates, CEOs. We need to encourage those big shots, as I call them, to come out and spill the beans. However, they have a very high level of living. So that's a conflict of interest. And so what we're saying, yes, in those cases only, that will save the taxpayer also a lot of money, we can talk about a percentage of reward. But all the other whistleblowers that public disclose wrongdoing at the place of work, that includes police officers, human rights activism complaints, torture, sexual discrimination at office, all those, I don't see a reason why they must get a reward, but they should get compensation when it comes to retaliation.
Hi, thank you very much, and many thanks for this very, very interesting event today. My current title would be perhaps a member of the strategy reference group of Transparency International, which works closely with the International Board of Transparency International in trying to advise not only the International Secretariat, but also the national chapters. I've also been, until very recently, the chair of Transparency International Greece, and in that capacity it is that I've worked closely with ARIS, which is not only a prominent whistleblower, as you all know, but also a very valuable collaborator in whistleblowing work. And I would like to ask anybody else who would like to contribute. Currently, as you may know, in Europe, we are being challenged by the incorporation of the EU whistleblowing directive into national laws. I mean, very few countries have succeeded so far to enact dedicated whistleblowing legislation on the basis of the EU directive, and the rest are still have exceeded the deadline, and they're still in the process of transposing this EU directive into national whistleblowing laws. This is because, I mean, it's not an easy task. We're faced with too many dilemmas and too many challenges, which way to go, which interests to balance. And I would please like your opinion in whether you're facing the same dilemmas and the same challenges in South Africa, and what you feel is the way forward, what choices have been made, because this will be useful for us all in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I can quickly answer that. We do have a Protected Disclosures Act in South Africa, which was promulgated in 2000 and then amended in 2017. To date, we've seen that this act does not truly and wholly protect whistleblowers, and part of our media statement today is that this Protected Disclosures Act should be overhauled and completely re-looked at, and we've made recommendations as such for it. So I can fully understand what the EU is currently experiencing, because I have followed the European directive at the moment, and we have noticed that many countries have obviously missed the deadline, which was the 17th of December. But we, on our side, we're going to work together with government, together with civil society, to ensure that we do make it better for people to disclose, because in the end of the day is that we are stemming the tide of corruption. Thank you. I hope that answers your question. We have another question online from Johan van Lochrenberg, if he can please answer. Thank you.
Hello to everybody. Thank you. I just wanted to pose a question to the panel. Recently, Business Unity South Africa, which represents a significant portion of South African private sector businesses, has offered to channel funding towards the National Prosecuting Authority to assist with speeding up prosecution of state capture related cases. Now, there have been some discomfort with that. And my question is really to the panel, has this initiative considered approaching BUSA to ask BUSA directly to perhaps consider channeling some of those funds towards this initiative rather, because I can't see anybody having any issues with that. And in particular, then also to support some of the current whistleblowers that are in financial distress or need psychiatric assistance or anything like that, legal assistance, etc.
Thank you, Johan. Good afternoon. Just to briefly answer your question, we are in discussions with the leadership of BUSA and Business Leadership South Africa, BLSA. We have discussed the continued membership of BAIN, which we are very concerned about, because BAIN has been mentioned by Zondo and has come under criticism for the role they played in dismembering SARS. And we would like to thank you and your team, Johan, for all that you did as a team of whistleblowers within SARS. To you, we owe much about how we know how our tax authority was almost taken away. To answer directly, that we don't believe that the prosecution arm of government should be assisted by the private sector, because the private sector has been largely complicit. It has been a dance for two, this dance of corruption in our country. We would support an independent, distanced fund to be established so that the independence of the prosecuting arms and of the judiciary can be upheld. Thank you, Johan.
Yes, that was supported from Kaya FM. I'd just like to know, I understand when you say you want fundamental reforms to the Protective Disclosures Act, and also where you mentioned the incentivized disclosures, but considering what's already happened perhaps over the last decade, I guess as an organization, as individuals, are you for the idea of reparations for where damage has already been done? And what kind of reparations would suffice for, we've lost lives. So what would reparations look like?
Cynthia, I'm happy to answer it. We have developed a six-step process, quite a rigorous process for the steps we believe companies who've done wrong can follow in order to make comprehensive amends for the harm they've caused and therefore re-earn their legitimacy. We don't believe just repaying fees is sufficient. We don't believe that vague statements of apology is sufficient. We believe there's got to be a rigorous process. And this rigorous process starts from companies needing to make full disclosure of exactly what they've done. So no withholding, but full disclosure. Secondly, around acknowledging the harms they've done and who they've committed those harms to. Again, we see these companies saying, oh, we apologize. Well, the apology can't be that vague. We need to apologize to particular individuals or parts of our society where the harm has been caused. But an important part of this process, the six-step process, is the co-creation between the perpetrator and the victim. So in my case, where I blew the whistle on Bain, this has to mean that Bain and Company needs to firstly admit to the full harm it did at SARS and then engage with SARS on developing what this solution must look like. It's sheer arrogance on behalf of the perpetrators to decide what they're going to do, decide what money they're going to contribute and where. It's got to be a co-creation with the victim. We need to have the perpetrators acknowledge what they've done and then work with the perpetrator to design what reparation looks like. And then, of course, making that reparation. What we've seen our country now begin to reject, which is encouraging, is just this mere thing of let's look to the future, let's ignore what happened in the past. Bain and some of these other organizations making some superficial changes and then saying we've made reparations. It's got to be that full six-step process.
We always talk about whistleblowers suffer from financial loss. It's more than that, because if you lose your income, your ability to earn, you have financial debt, which is your home loans and credit cards, etc. So part of the reparations is that if there's going to be some incentive to be paid towards that, so the whistleblower can offset that debt, or B, that banks have to then come up with a plan to write off whistleblower debt. And I think that's a major reparation that needs to be done. Thank you.
I just want to make a point. As a social worker, we are trained from the word go. Prevention is better than cure. There are two whistleblowers who are part of the group who are not here today because of their psychological, social, emotional, and physical health has been so compromised and undermined that they've asked me to be their spokesperson. Now, it's not a very comfortable thing to have to do. Social workers want to help clients get their sense of agency and protagonism. They can speak for themselves, but they just said, John, please, we can't handle more of the stress. It re-traumatizes us, it causes us difficulty. Now, the two people that I mentioned are Musila Motepu and Angelo Agrizzi. There are a number of other whistleblowers that have come to me for professional support and encouragement, who are also, in a sense, representing, but I don't want to be confused that I'm a lawyer representing them. I'm trying to ensure that the voice that I have can be used. Get that message across. We want to prevent, because there's a vast subterranean reservoir of information waiting to come to the surface. But if whistleblowers are not protected, it's like the springs that are going to bring that to the surface are not going to flow, and our society is not going to be cleansed of the contagion of corruption that we have.
John, may I ask you a question before you go? John?
If you insist, Andy.
I of course know of your work with the Zolobeni mining conflict and the viciousness of slap suits. Can you explain how that influenced your collaboration with whistleblowers and, drove you to be in a position where you are now to kind of champion these causes along with some of the people who were there?
Yes. Well, thank you. And in fact, people know me for having worked as a social worker with the Polobeni community in the Wild Coast, and for my efforts got a defamation slap suit myself. Social workers always try and make lemonade out of the bitter lemons in life. And after the initial shock, I realized that there was an opportunity here for us to do something in terms of changing the law and to ensure that there isn't this weaponization of the legal process. Now, when I became a social worker, and the same would be true of you journalists, this is what you signed up for. You've got some sense of scrutiny, and you know that this is your vocation. Whistleblowers didn't go to work to become whistleblowers. They came to work to do their jobs, and they are not with the same mindset and set of preparation. So I've now coined another term from the SLAP suit called the SLOW suit, Strategic Litigation on Whistleblowers. And next month, the Constitutional Court is going to be hearing our counsel making the point that our law needs to change to ensure that there is not the weaponized use of the law against people who speak the truth as activists, whistleblowers, and media. Hopefully we'll see a more joined up response that the legal profession stops doing this, because that's been the biggest concern I've had in supporting the whistleblower clients, is the ordeal that they have to go through these weaponized disciplinary procedures.
Are there any further questions? I think I saw a hand at the back. Yes. Thank you, sir.
The point I want to make is, if we're going to wait another 4 years later, by all accounts, after this ordinance, most of us will be all wasted. The point is, there are other instruments. They happen to be foreign, but they are vital and very potent instruments, such as the US Foreign Corruption, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, as well as the Tort Act, which could basically be leveraged off to prosecute class action, both civil and criminal. And I think we found them to be very effective. For instance, within 48 hours of contacting the US DOJ, we got a response, the case was filed. Try that with the NPA. They'll probably tell you the files with the hawks is with the eagles is finding something. By the time you know it, there's a new regime that has changed. We know that the politics are also affecting how the prosecutions operate. So basically, I'm just saying there are other avenues which we are pursuing and which everybody can pursue. And I've reached out to some of the people that we've had on air here. And we think there should be something that we as individuals or even as society can do to seek justice for the people who did so much for this country. I think our generation and generations to come will owe a debt of gratitude, because our country was built from the abyss. If it wasn't for whistleblowers, we could have been a failed state many times over. In fact, Zimbabwe would want to welcome us. And we can close their borders and say, sorry, the state is failed. Because if we fail, we're going to fail big time. And last point I want to make before I sorry to monopolize this, is BLSA must take South Africa into its confidence. We need to know exactly what it is that they've agreed to pay and what terms did they use to actually suspend the suspension of pay, or to lift the suspension. Because it cannot be that multinationals come here, they extract unlawful proceeds through either transfer pricing and so forth. Now we see them doing basically seeding or supporting kleptocracy, not only South Africa but the rest of Africa. And if we are to thrive as a country, never mind as a continent, we need to ensure that the likes of Bain find it difficult to trade. And it's not only Bain, there's a host of others, including banks, some of whom are within our throats, because we want to ensure that those who've got asset depository registers in the New York Stock Exchange, for example, they get to freeze their account. The names are there in the report. That's as much as I can say.
Thank you, Tebogo, and thank you again for the options that you've given us regarding the FCPA and PRECCA, which we are aware of. And also thank you for mentioning how we need to start companies like BLSA to take South Africa into its confidence. So we fully understand. This brings us to the conclusion of our media statement event today, and we'd like to go into thanks. So I first would like to acknowledge all the whistleblowers here today, all the media who came, and various organizations. So there's the Active Citizens Movement, there's the Leaders for Integrity, and then Outer Corruption Watch, Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, the Gordon Institute of Business Science, Professor Morris specifically for his bold commitment to making GIBS a safe place for whistleblowers to meet and talk. I'd like to hand over just to, if Coogan would like to just give a one-liner or some thanks.
Good morning all, and thanks for the opportunity. As has been mentioned, I'm from an organization, co-founder from Leaders for Integrity, but also a member of the Active Citizen Movement, and served recently also at finalizing the National Anti-Corruption Strategy at the Presidency and the SRU. So you can see my interest is to make sure that the National Anti-Corruption Strategy gets implemented, and thanks to all the brave work of all the whistleblowers that have exposed corruption. And I don't have to mention to you, the last speaker spoke about state failure. And I think many of you know what state failure is. You don't want to have a Zimbabwe situation or an Afghanistan situation or a Lebanon situation. And that's where we'll go if we do not implement urgently. That if the Zondo recommendations are not implemented with urgency, then the ANC will be relegated to the dustbins of history. If the present leadership of the ANC under President Ramaphosa does not urgently implement, then the leadership becomes complicit. But I think as whistleblowers and as broader civil society, we have a responsibility not to go down that route. And hence, as my colleagues have mentioned, we've made submissions to the Zondo Commission. We've initiated discussions with the presidency, with the Department of Justice, with Business Unity, to try and see how we can fix up the damage of state capture before we become a total failure. With that, thanks colleagues, and thanks to you for attending. Thank you.
Then our final thanks will be done with Advocate Stediso, who will from the South African Human Rights Commission.
Thank you, colleagues. Tsipanyane, the CEO of the South African Human Rights Commission. I would like to start by thanking colleagues who are whistleblowers for their gallant efforts in helping to fight for democracy, good governance, and the rule of law. I also want to thank the whistleblowers for change, the colleagues who are here, for putting together this media conference, but also for their own sacrifices in fighting for a better regime to protect whistleblowers. South African Human Rights Commission's mandate is to promote and protect human rights. And we are very clear that corruption undermines human rights, it undermines democracy, it undermines the rule of law. And therefore, we as a body which has been established to protect human rights has to play a role in ensuring that we do fight corruption much more effectively and in a better way. In this regard, then, the role of whistleblowers becomes very, very important. Unfortunately, as colleagues have pointed out, that our current legal framework, the PDA Act as well as the Witness Protection Act, are not sufficient to provide adequate protection and also to encourage whistleblowers to come out and basically help us to fight corruption in a better manner. And of course, we have seen through the Zondo Commission the role which whistleblowers play. And I'm of the view that had it not been of the gallant and heroic efforts of many whistleblowers, the Zondo Commission would not have been where it is today. And therefore, it is important as that for us as citizens of this country, really go out of our way to protect whistleblowers, to put pressure on the government to basically have a much better legal framework to protect whistleblowers. And the Zondo recommendations are out, and I think it is important that the state and everybody else take those recommendations seriously and basically ensure that we do have a proper legal framework. Now, we as a Human Rights Commission have been involved in issues around whistleblowers. We took the case of Mr. Zulu to court, where we felt that he was not being given adequate protection by the state for being a whistleblower. over political assassination in KZN. We won the case, but unfortunately, due to inadequacies in the Act, Mr. Zulu could not even stay under witness protection. And as we stand today, Mr. Zulu was shot at a few months ago. He's still in hiding today. He has not received adequate protection. We are in court. We lost a case in the labor court on behalf of Mr. Obilana, who was a whistleblower for misconduct amongst teachers in Mpumalanga, and his contract was not renewed. We lost the case in the labor court. We are now appealing to the Labor Court of Appeal. We have spent over 3 million rand as a commission in defending this whistleblowers. It actually highlights the gap in our Act. The Act says if you are a whistleblower, you should not suffer from occupational detriment, should not be victimized. But clearly what we're seeing in our country today is that whistleblowers are victimized. They lose their jobs, they lose their livelihoods. And for them to fight for their rights, they have to go to court on their own. There's no system here which protects them. And that's why we're saying we do need a better legal framework. And one hopes that members of parliament and government should not wait for people to go to court, for the court to say the current legal framework is unconstitutional, which it is. And therefore we do need a better legal framework. And therefore I'm really hoping that all of us here as citizens, as media, will really support and heed the call that we do need a better legal framework if we're going to make a meaningful impact in fighting corruption, which undermines our rights. It denies our children education, it denies our people better health care. You travel around the country, you see many potholes because the money has gone due to corruption. And we need whistleblowers to turn the tide against corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Advocate. I would like to call on one last person. He's a member of parliament. He's in our audience, the Honorable Bantu Holomeso. You welcome to come and say a few words, sir. You were the whistleblower on the PIC and you made a huge difference, and we'd like you to come up and say something. Thank you, sir.
Our program director, the leadership, ladies and gentlemen, what mine would just be to encourage you to be strong on the initiative you are involved in. What you are doing reminds me of the civil society, which played a major role in bringing apartheid to its knees. I'm not implying that you must campaign against the government, but I think you would make a big mistake if you were to allow yourselves to be part of a government institution. Remain independent, remain vigilant, lobby the government authorities, lobby members of parliament, but be strong. I was just ambushed. Normally, I don't take orders from civilians, so but I wish you well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, folk, for coming. Just to say, in terms of the statement, I will be emailing it to everybody that's on my mailing list within the next hour or so. The reason I got into this is that I had the privilege of actually interviewing the whistleblowers as each of them brought out their books for my YouTube channel. So if you want to get a bit more of a deep introspection about what's happening, I've interviewed Aris Danikas, Cynthia Stimple, Tembo Maseko, Masila Matepu, of course, and Angelo Agrizzi. It was just such a fulfilling experience, and I just have to say, there's nothing more satisfying to a social worker after 40 years of practice to have a bunch of folk with such sense of agency, commitment, and protagonism, and to just be of service to them. And it has given me hope that there is a future for this country, and it's going to be them. It should never be the case that the whistleblower should have to be the last line of defense from falling into the failed state. And I think everybody agrees with it. The challenge is, how do we spontaneously and collectively organize ourselves to actually make sure that, South Africa becomes known internationally again for a place where miracles happen. Archbishop Desmond Tutu's death recently cut to me very deeply, and you'll see in the Mail and Guardian, I've reflected on that. But I remember it was in 1978, where I first met him, that set me on this journey. And the thought I have had, which I would like to just leave, is that he's been criticized for supposedly not following through on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And one of the key objectives of us as a group is to say, let that not happen with the Zondo Commission. It wasn't Archbishop Tutu's fault that the recommendations and the reparations and what have you didn't happen. It was the state's fault. And it's going to be us responsible citizens to hold the state accountable to make sure that the recommendations and findings of the Zondo Commission are not neglected, even if it means we've got to get a hold of all those affidavits, all that material, and start instituting private prosecutions. We cannot allow the state to fail us again.